Breaking news. Trump reportedly caught on tape. Damaging new evidence in the Trump classified documents criminal investigation. CNN is reporting prosecutors have obtained an audio recording of a summer 2021 meeting in which former President Donald Trump acknowledges that he held on to a classified Pentagon document about a potential attack on Iran. The recording indicating Trump understood that he had retained classified materials after leaving the White House. The report adds, on the recording, Trump's comments suggest he would like to share the information, but he's aware of limitations on his ability post-presidency to declassify records. This directly undercuts one of Trump's defenses that he could and that he did declassify everything. CNN has not listened to the recording, but multiple sources have described it, and NBC News has not confirmed this reporting. Now, consider this breaking news with the same lens of new reporting from the Washington Post that prosecutors are closing in on Trump, eyeing Mar-a-Lago surveillance video and possible gaps. The Post reporting Mar-a-Lago prosecutors are looking at a July 2022 episode with Trump surveillance cameras. An employee who helped move boxes of documents last June was then reportedly questioned about his conduct weeks later related to a government demand for surveillance footage from Trump's property. And detailing the employee's actions have caught the attention of investigators as they try to determine whether Trump or people close to him sought to obstruct justice. Joining me now is Maya Wiley, CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and former SDNY civil prosecutor, and Paul Butler, former federal prosecutor and professor of law at Georgetown University. Folks, this is some big news. And of course, the caveat is NBC News has not confirmed the reporting yet. But assuming arguendo, what we've read so far is true. Maya, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts on this explosive new CNN report?
Well, you said the word, Katie, explosive. I mean, all of this investigation on the part of Jack Smith is about determining Trump's state of mind if Donald Trump is to be charged with any crime here. Now, we already know the evidence has been very strong and, many legal experts of all stripes and even all political persuasions, including Donald Trump's own former attorney, believe he's in deep peril on an obstruction charge related to these presidential documents that he does not own, that the American people own. But anything that gives evidence and indication that he completely understood that he was not to have or share these documents is just the last nail in a coffin that already has a whole lot of nails in it.
Maya Wiley, I was the paragon of grace. Deep peril is a very polite way of saying something even deeper. Paul, sources are describing the recording as an important piece of evidence in a possible case against Trump, who has repeatedly asserted he could retain presidential records and, quote, automatically declassify documents. Paul, you and I, Maya, all of us, we've talked a lot about the obstruction component of this investigation, but do we now have some of the strongest evidence in support of an Espionage Act violation here?
Absolutely, Katie. This is devastating for Donald Trump for two reasons. First, as Maya said, it's a confession on audio tape that Trump knew that he possessed classified documents. So Trump's defense that he had declassified everything is just a lie. Trump was fully aware that he was illegally hoarding top secret government documents. And second, to your point, Katie, if this reporting is true, this is about national security. It's way more than a documents case, as Mar-a-Lago has sometimes been dismissed. So the most important question is one we don't know the answer to, but Jack Smith might. How was Trump intending to use this material? Maybe he was just holding on to it to impress his friends and kind of a criminal version of show and tell. But prosecutors, they always follow the money, and they almost certainly suspect that Trump had some kind of caper in mind, that he either did or planned to use his illegal access to the nation's most sensitive secrets to enrich himself or to forward his political ambitions.
You know, Maya, I want to emphasize a couple of things that came out of this CNN report. Number one, it dealt with plans for a possible attack on Iran. Talk about security issues, international relations, domestic security issues. But what really struck me, though, is this report talks about, Maya, General Mark Milley. He's actually testified before the grand jury and met with investigators for special counsel Jack Smith. How much more compelling evidence would you need as Jack Smith to be able to be at this point, this tipping point of bringing an indictment against Donald Trump, considering you'd have a witness like Mark Milley who's telling the grand jury and the investigators for Jack Smith what happened, what that document was? I mean, this is yet another layer in a huge peeling onion that shows that Trump has some serious exposure here.
Yeah, there's no question it's a significant layer of onion peel. And both to Paul's really important point and your own, Katie, we don't even know how many more layers to this onion there is in terms of all these classified documents. It was one of the reasons everyone was so deeply concerned that it wasn't just a mere document retention issue, but that it was the nature of how many and how seriously classified, as we know there are different levels of classification there are. So to your point, we know that there are witnesses appearing in droves at this point, despite Donald Trump's best efforts and his legal team's best efforts to keep people with knowledge and information that directly relates to what Donald Trump might know and what these documents represented away from Jack Smith and away from that grand jury. And we don't know what any of these witnesses are saying, but what we do know is they are at the top of the government food chain in terms of who has been testifying before this grand jury, who would have direct knowledge and who would have every personal interest in making sure they were not perjuring themselves. And possibly, because we don't know, even being offered the opportunity to have immunity if they had any concern about their own criminal liability. So that's just a long way of saying we don't know all the facts. Paul is really right to spell that out. But to your point, Katie, we certainly know that people who, if they're goods to be got, Jack Smith's got the folks who got them.
And Paul, to Maya's point, DOJ prosecutors, they're always moving at different paces. There's different kind of components to an investigation. But what we do know from reporting, these prosecutors are laser focused on as well the Mar-a-Lago surveillance video with a staffer being questioned. I mean, considering where we are, that you might have video evidence of a crime being committed, but then you're able to actually get to and speak to witnesses that actually were a part of the kind of boots on the ground operation that Trump might be running at Mar-a-Lago. Where are we in this probe then, and considering the evidence that Jack Smith has on his plate?
It certainly seems like we're near the end of the investigation. Now, what is likely happening is prosecutors are drawing up a draft indictment, and I want to focus or emphasize draft. It doesn't mean that there's been a decision made to prosecute Donald Trump, but typically in public corruption cases, especially high-profile cases like this, prosecutors will draft an indictment and then have a review session with all of the experienced prosecutors to determine whether first the case should be brought and second, whether the case can be won. That is, a jury can be persuaded beyond a reasonable doubt. And Katie, we already knew that there was this mysterious Mar-a-Lago employee who was involved with moving the documents around, possibly as part of the obstruction of justice that a federal judge found probable cause was happening at Mar-a-Lago. That was the basis of the search warrant last August. Now there's even more evidence of obstruction. Somebody at Mar-a-Lago was worried about what those videotapes might show. The cliche, it's always the cover-up. It's often true.